Hello there, beautiful. This is Kim Parkinson, and you are listening to Podcasting for Spiritual Women. And I am super excited to be bringing you this little mini series at the end of the meteorological summer to showcase just a few things that you can do every day, every week, every time you want to increase your downloads. So if you're finding that your podcast is getting less than 100 downloads per episode, these are just a few little tweaks that you can do to really just get it to shine a little bit more and be seen organically through different platforms. And I'm talking podcasting platforms specifically. While Google's great, Google has really changed. Even since I started this podcast, it's really gone from showcasing different websites to kind of showcasing just more of what ChatGPT and all of the other AI has to say. So the thing is, podcast players are not there yet. So if you have listeners that are in Apple or they're in Spotify or even Overcast or Castos or any of those podcast players, then these tips are going to be super beneficial for you. So this series started on Tuesday with your podcast name. And if you did not listen to that, I do recommend that you listen to that because what we did, if I'll just give a tiny recap here, is we grabbed about 20 to 30 different transcriptions and then we ran them through AI. I know not everybody likes AI. I do get it. But in this case, you're talking minutes as opposed to maybe weeks, right? Finding all of the different keywords in each of those episodes. It is not going out there into the world and it is not going, hey, you use this word. It is looking for the words in your transcription. So in ChatGPT or whatever your AI preferred platform is, you're going to just say, please pull out the top 10 keywords in this episode and make sure that they are SEO rich and make sure that, you could even say something along the lines of think like a SEO expert and please pull out the top SEO rich keywords in this episode and then let it run. Open, add the transcript and let it run and then pull them all up. Add those to a spreadsheet so you can see like right in front of you what all those different words are. And then we're going to be using those again today. So you use them on Tuesday to update your podcast name, whether or not that was a naming convention at the beginning of an episode, which is SEO rich, at the end of the episode to make it a little bit longer. But now we're going to use those same keywords and we are going to take a look at your description. Because podcast players, when they do crawl, they crawl for your podcast name first. And then the second thing is your description. And you want that description to be super powerful. And if you are paying for platforms such as Captivate, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, any of those are going to let you have a lot more of your description in there than any other platform. So if you're using a Spotify for podcasters, the free one, you could have limited results on this. But for most of the hosts, you're going to find that you can have a ton of words in it. Now, I want you to start the first sentence with keywords. And here's the thing. I mentioned this a couple times. I almost want you to keyword stuff, but I don't because it'll eventually catch on, right? It'll eventually say, oh, she's keyword stuffing and let's not do that. We're going to penalize her. So I don't want you to get penalized, but I do want you to take a look at your keywords and see how you can string along a couple of keywords in a sentence naturally, right? So whether or not that is coaching or spiritual women, or whether or not you have some other type of keywords that you talk about on a regular basis, I want you to add those right to the very first sentence of your description. The second sentence should also kind of dive a little bit more into it. Don't mention your podcast yet. Don't mention you nor your podcast yet. We're still going to talk about your keywords. We're going to talk about your keywords and we're going to talk a little bit more about what it is that you talk about. So start with the keyword right away. have a little sentence that has quite a bit of keywords, then talk a little bit more in the second sentence about what it is that you talk about on your show. And then even maybe the third sentence, depending, right? So you want 2 to 3 sentences right off the bat to really have a lot of different keywords in it. The first one's going to have the most, then you're going to have a little bit less, then a little bit less, and on, right? The second paragraph is when you're going to introduce yourself. And then you're going to mention yourself by name. And I want you to also mention what you do, who you are. So, are you a leadership coach? Are you a life coach? Are you something else? So, I want you to really mention those in your second paragraph right after your name. You still haven't mentioned your podcast yet, or the podcast name yet. And that's actually by design. You don't have to because it's already crawled first. So you don't even ever have to mention your podcast name. If you feel really out of whack about it, then go ahead and do that. I would do that in the second paragraph, but in the later half of the second paragraph. You do not need to ever mention it, but you can. Now, the third paragraph could be like a little bit of a wrap up about yourself, about maybe one of your programs that you regularly talk about, something like that. I haven't added any links to it yet, or actually, I never add any links to it. So I leave those for the actual podcast show notes. And also, realistically, that's going to be added directly into your host as well. So I don't add any links in my podcast description. Second paragraph, yourself. Third paragraph, a little bit more about you or your products, whatever it might be. And then I'm going to have you think of 5 to 10 Google style questions that when someone asks these questions, the answer to these questions is your podcast, is topics that you talk about in your podcast. So, for instance, for mine, it could be something along the lines of, I want to start a podcast as a spiritual entrepreneur. There we go. Then you should be listening to Podcasting for Spiritual Women. Or maybe you have some other types of questions that you might want to answer there or ask there, right? So I want you to come up with 5 to 10 Google style questions where the answer is going to be your podcast. If you are stumped, I'm going to ask you to use AI again. You do not have to use the whole question as is, as it spits it out. It's just for more ideas, right? I'm always using AI as more ideas. For instance, I actually asked AI what I should talk about for this episode. And actually, I'm going to even back up. So I originally had booked a different episode for August 19th. And I said, you know what? I need a episode for August 21. What can I do? It came out with something, and that I was like, no. This is, I'm going to start over. I'm going to start with what I know. And I'm going to start right at the beginning with Tuesday's episode and move on. So I asked it the question of like what it is, what could I talk about? It spit out an answer for me. And that answer sparked an idea in my head. And that's where this is now. So that is what I'm requesting from you when you use AI. Just always let it spark that idea and then go from there with it. Okay. So in this case, now we have written out paragraph 1, which is got a lot of different keywords in it, talks about all of the different topics that you talk about in your podcast. Paragraph 2 is going to be a little bit about you and who you are and what you do. Paragraph 3 could be a little bit about your programs or what it is that how you teach or something like that. And then I'm going to ask you to say, this podcast covers topics such as, and then you're going to answer it with the 5 to 10 different Google style questions. These Google style questions could come back up in next week's episode because I think they could do double duty here for you, right? So you could actually use those questions specifically as podcast names for episodes. So that's going to double duty for you on that particular piece. And I think it's a good segue here to kind of just give you that thoughts of just a few updates and changes. Now, before I let you go here, I just want to mention you can change your podcast description at any time. I suggest that once you change your podcast description, if it has SEO rich, keyword rich, that you change it and you let it sit there for 30, 60, 90 days. See if it works. See what's working in that amount of time. I don't want you to change it on a daily basis. That's not going to work for you. You really need to give all of those web crawlers and all of those other crawlers a little bit of time. You're going to need just a little bit of patience here, right? So you just need a little bit of patience. And then once that is done, if you find that it's just not working the way you want it to work, you can change it again. Let me tell you, I started this podcast with one description and I already changed it in July. So I started it in June. I changed it the end of July, beginning of August, and it was only 30 days, but I realized that it really wasn't as SEO rich as I thought it was. And after I had done some episodes, I realized I was really going in a different direction. So that is definitely something to take into account, is sometimes your podcast path moves and you need to change the description to move with you. All right. When you get into your podcast host, there should be somewhere in like your settings or somewhere like that where you can add all of that. Hopefully it hasn't been super, super long so that you don't have to truncate it in any way. Usually in the paid ones, they give you quite a lengthy amount. I think Apple actually will take about 8,000 characters, I think is what the keywords were, or what the framework was there. So I think you probably have that amount of time or that amount of space. But I do want to just mention that if you don't, you may have to maybe have only 5 Google style questions, or maybe you might have to be a little less wordy in one of the paragraphs above. All right. If you have any questions on this, or if you would like more information about how to go ahead and do that, I do offer a free podcast growth clarity call, and I would love to talk to you about your podcast and how we can grow it with just a couple of different tips and tricks here. If you want to, the link to that is in the show notes, or you can go to kpcreativemedia.com/growth-clarity-call. All right, this is Kim Parkinson, and join us again next Tuesday where we are going to go over the 3rd most crawled pieces of your podcast. All right, until then, thanks so much. See you soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Podcasting for Spiritual Women. If you would like more strategy and tips and some tricks on how to make your podcast better, I recommend that you join my newsletter list. You can find that at kpcreativemedia.com/newsletter. Until next time.